Okay, so let's move on from our first video where we introduced veins and arteries, and let's talk about them a little bit individually now. So arteries are kind of categorized into several different types. We have arteries that are very elastic, so they're called elastic arteries. And these elastic arteries are fairly large. They're able to stretch quite a bit, like a rubber band, and accept blood under a lot of pressure. Now, it says they function as a pressure reservoir. So, like your aorta is a perfect example because your aorta can take a lot of blood and stretch out and then go back to its original shape between heartbeats. Now, as the arteries get smaller, they become more muscular. And so here it says medium-sized, sorry, bad circle there. Medium-sized arteries are called muscular because they have more muscle than elastic tissue. And these are the ones that can undergo vasoconstriction and vasodilation. Now, as these muscular arteries get smaller, they become arterioles. So it says arterioles are just very small, almost microscopic arteries. And they are really good at vasoconstricting and vasodilating. So when we need to alter things like blood pressure, let's say our blood pressure is too low and the body needs to raise blood pressure. Well, one of the ways that we can do that is we can vasoconstrict the arterioles. And the vasoconstriction is going to narrow down those passages and allow the blood pressure to go up. So arterioles are just smaller arteries, and they're really good at vasoconstriction because they have quite a bit of that tunica media layer with the muscle. All right, now as we go from arteries to arterioles, then we start moving into capillaries. And capillaries are microscopic and they're found everywhere. So think of capillaries, every tissue is near a capillary because this is where all of the nutrient and waste exchange occurs. So the blood is going to flow into the capillaries. All that nutrient and waste exchange is going to occur, and the capillaries are all over our body. So this is important. It says that the capillary is only made of that internal layer, the tunica interna. So even though our veins and arteries have those three layers, the capillaries are down to that one layer of cells. So we have one layer of cells that make up that endothelium. The tunica media and the tunica externa are not present in the arteries, or I'm sorry, in the capillaries. They're not there. So diffusion can occur very easily, and things can move in and out of a capillary much easier than if it had those other layers. Now let's look really quickly. There are three types of capillaries. The first type right here is called a continuous capillary, and I've got a picture of it. And you can see that it's called a continuous capillary because that endothelium layer is complete. And we find these in places like the lungs, the skeletal muscle, smooth muscle, and they allow a lot of diffusion of small items like oxygen or CO2, glucose, things like that. Now, the next one is called a fenestrated capillary. Fenestrated capillaries, look, it has little holes in the endothelium. And these fenestrated capillaries contain these things called fenestrations, which are holes. Now, we can move larger molecules through these fenestrations. So if we need to move larger products in and out of the cell, then we can do that with these fenestrated capillaries. Where do we find them? Places like the kidney, small intestine, the choroid plexus of our brain, and various endocrine cells. So when you think about, like a hormone it's a big molecule. It may need help getting put into the bloodstream. So these holes, these fenestrations, allow a larger molecule to pass. Now our third type of capillary is called a sinusoid. And sinusoids have huge Swiss cheese holes. So it says they have very large fenestrations. Their basement membrane, this membrane that holds everything together, is incomplete. And they are going to move large things, maybe even entire cells, like entire red blood cells. So places like our liver, bone marrow, spleen, these three places are moving entire cells. We are making red blood cells in the bone marrow and we're putting it out there. We are recycling red blood cells in the liver and spleen. So entire cells can move through these capillaries. And so we have these three different types of capillaries for three different functions. What do we have to move across the membrane? All right. And then once we're done moving products in and out of the capillary, the blood is going to then exit the capillary and start heading into the venules. Venules are just small veins. So it says we're going to collect blood from the capillaries. It says the tunica media only contains a few smooth muscle cells. So they have all three layers. They just don't have a lot of muscle. And the venules are also very porous. Venules then start getting larger as they carry blood toward the heart. They get larger and larger and become veins. So here you can see just a little schematic of arterioles, capillaries, and venules. So what direction do blood cells move? They move in this direction from the arteries or arterioles through the capillaries to the venules. All right, then the larger vessels or veins, they're going to continue to carry blood up to the heart. They still have those same three tunics that I mentioned, but it says they have a thinner tunica interna and a thinner tunica media, and then a thicker tunica externa. So we just have different proportions of those three layers in veins. Veins are not as elastic because they don't need to stretch like an artery because the blood pressure is lower, so they have less smooth muscle. They're much thinner walled, and they contain valves. The blood is barely moving through veins. We still have some pressure, which allows the blood to move, but the blood might backtrack without these valves. So we have valves to help push the blood along toward the heart. Some veins are large reservoirs. We call them venous or vascular sinuses. And vascular sinuses are going to be collecting blood over a large amount. And a good example of this would be our coronary sinus that we learned about that's on the back of the heart. So all of those veins, the coronary veins, are carrying blood to that coronary sinus. And then the coronary sinus can then collect all that blood and deliver it to the right atrium. All right, so here are the veins and the valves. So you can see over here, this is a cadaver vein, and you can see the valve. They look like little semilunar valves, and they allow blood to move in only one direction. So if the blood is trying to backtrack, it gets stopped at these valves. So it just says the valves are thin folds of the tunica interna that prevent the backflow of blood. Remember, blood in our circulatory system needs to go in one direction. So it's a one-way route through our body. And these valves help with that. Now, To end this video, I want to talk about a problem that can occur with the valves. If the valves stop working properly and they're not pushing blood, we can get what's called a varicose vein. Varicose veins are when these valves become very leaky, all right? And these leaky valves are going to cause blood to pool. So here you can see this is a healthy valve where you've got blood flow moving through the valves and everything is healthy. If these valves start leaking, blood can start leaking back and pooling in these veins, causing these veins to get all twisted and swollen. And this is what we call a varicose vein. Now it says they can be congenital, meaning you can get them during as a birth defect, but usually they're mechanically stressed. People get them in their legs with prolonged standing. Pregnancy puts a lot of stress on the body and can cause varicose veins. But we have this backflow of blood. And when this blood pools, the tissue surrounding it gets very inflamed and tender, and it's very painful to have varicose veins. Not only is it not very appealing to look at, it's kind of unsightly, those people that have varicose veins, but it's actually very painful too. It says the most common places for varicose veins, kind of weird, but the esophagus, because it can be under a lot of stress. The superficial veins of our legs, so that's just the lower limbs, that's just legs. So often we get varicose veins in our legs. And then it says the veins in the anal canal. So your anal varicose veins are known as hemorrhoids. So a hemorrhoid is a varicose vein of your butthole. And so it's just a pouch of swollen tissue that is full of blood from a leaky valve. A lot of people get hemorrhoids due to pregnancy. They're having a baby. And so when mom is having her baby and she's pushing really hard, she can't tell what her vagina is versus her anus. So when the doctor's telling her to push, she's just pushing down there. And that can cause a lot of pressure, and you can blow out some of these venous valves and cause hemorrhoids. Another way that a lot of people get hemorrhoids is when they're trying to poop. They may be constipated, so they're trying to push really hard to poop, and that can also cause varicose veins. So what you need to do is, just relax when you're pooping, and you'll be in better shape. Okay, so the next handout will be going into handout 21B.